Hello everybody and welcome. This is Roland Hartmann from graphicinmotion.com, and in this tutorial I want to show you how you can create a nice 3D particles logo build-up animation. So let's take a look at the preview. You see some particles come together, they rise up from a floor and then they form a 3D logo. The logo is revealed and in the end the logo is falling apart again. I'm not sure whether we will cover the whole animation in this tutorial because it could be a little bit too much for one tutorial, but I try to at least show you the build up and reveal, and probably the disperse will be something that you have to create on your own, but I'm sure after this tutorial you will be able, without a doubt, that you can create this disperse in the end on your own. But let's see how far I get with the tutorial. For those of you who follow me along on YouTube for a while, or maybe also on VideoHive, you probably know this template, and you probably know that this is the 3D Particles logo build up and break apart template. So this was actually my first ever VideoHive template, and it's now nearly 3.5 years old. And I thought that it's time to share a little bit of technique and knowledge here. But I really would appreciate it, of course, if you buy one of my templates and support me that way, because this is the only possibility how I can keep producing free stuff, tutorials and project files and stuff for you guys. So be sure to check out my VideoHive profile, and also please be sure to check out my website, which is www.graphicinmotion.com, and there you can also find all my After Effects templates, some stock footage, motion graphic stock footage, and of course some freebies, textures, project files, and all my tutorials. So yeah, check out the stuff. I would be glad if you find something you like and if you support me a little bit. So enough self-advertising. Now let's get started with this tutorial. Before I get started in After Effects, I will shortly explain what I will do here. So if we take a look at the animation, you see that the particles come together and rise up in the air and form a logo. And if you're a little bit familiar with Trapcode Particular and how it works, then you probably know that this is very difficult to make natively. So what we are going to do basically is to create a logo that is falling apart, and particles that fall from the logo to the ground, they slide away, and then we will just reverse this animation. So this will be our workflow. Now let's get started in After Effects and let's create a new composition. Whatever resolution you like. For me it's 1080p, 25 frames per second and 30 seconds long, and I will call my first comp main. And I will create a new composition, another one, which will be my logo composition. And now I will just import my logo and drag it into my logo comp and scale it down, in my case, to about 30%. Let's see, it looks quite good. And I move to my main composition and drag in my logo comp. So the first step will be to create a 3D representation of our logo formed by particles. And therefore I need to create a new solid first. So new solid, or Ctrl Y, and I will call it particles logo. Make sure that it's comp size and press OK. Now let's go to our Effect and Presets window and search for the Trapcode Particular effect. And here you go, Trapcode Particular. And now we see, if I just scroll through my timeline, that Particular is emitting white particles from a point in the middle. Great. But we want them to be emitted from our logo. So therefore, first of all, we have to change the logo layer into a 3D layer, because emitting layers for Particular always have to be 3D, otherwise you will get an error message. So let's go to the Particular effect and let's go into the emitter settings. Here we change the emitter type from point to layer, and under the layer emitter tab here we change the layer from none to logo, and you see immediately some particles shoot out of our logo. They're very small and not that much, so I will increase the size for now so that we can see a little bit better what we are doing, just for the moment. And I will increase the number also so that we see a little bit more what's happening. So you see particles shoot out. But what I want to do here is I don't want them to shoot out, I want them to form the logo. So I will just reduce all the velocities in the emitter settings. So let's take down the velocity to 0, let's take down the random velocity distribution and the motion from velocity. And you see now, yeah, you don't see much, but you see some particles are blinking. So we have to increase the lifetime a bit. 3 seconds is a little bit short, so I will increase this to about 7 seconds for now. And I also want to increase the number of keyframes emitted per second. So from 500, I really cranked this up to about 25,000 for now. And then you see, okay, now immediately something is happening here. So the logo is building up. And to make this a little bit more obvious, I will create a new camera. So let's go to Layer, New and Camera. And in my case, I want to create a 2-noded camera and 24 millimeters, so a little bit of a wide angle camera. Press OK. And now if we take our camera tools by pressing C on the keyboard and rotate a little bit, then you see that we have a little bit of depth here. So it's not only a flat particles layer, it is actually a 3D representation of our logo, or of whatever shape you put into our logo composition. So now let's move back to our logo particle settings. And I want to increase this depth even more. So let's change the emitter size in C, on the C axis, from 50 to 100 pixels. And let's take a look. And you see that this looks pretty good. And now if I take a look, it's not really dense. So I probably have to increase the particles per second. And I will increase it to 75,000 for now, because I want this logo to build up quite fast. So let's see. Now it builds up approximately in 1 second. So this is probably good. I'm not sure. We will maybe come back here and change this later on. But for now, I think that this is good. So to make this a little bit more obvious that it's 3D, I want to turn on the shadow LEDs of the particles. And therefore, we move down to our Shading tab. And here you see shadow LED for main particles, and this is exactly what we need. Turn this on, and now you see that we have this cloudy look, so it's some kind of ambient occlusion effect actually. And what I want to do now is I want to change the look of the particles a little bit, because now they are like feathered out spheres, and I want to make them a little bit more obvious. I reduced the feathering to 0 for now, so we have full bold particles. And now to create a little bit better contrast, I will quickly create a new layer, a new solid, and call this BG for background. Drag it on bottom of our timeline here. And I will just add a quick gradient ramp. And with this gradient ramp, we'll just create a very simple background. In fact, we will take a radial map, we will swap our colors, and this swap colors is not included in every version. So if you're working with CS5, then you probably don't have it, then you have to do it manually. But I just want to create a quick background here. So let's change these colors a bit. Nothing fancy, just something very basic, but it will do. And now you see what we have got here. Okay. So for my particles logo, I will reduce the strength of the shadow LEDs a bit. I think they are a little bit too dark, so I can come in here into my shadow LED settings, and instead of color strength 100, I can just reduce this to, let's say, 75 or 80, just to reduce the darkness a bit. And I think this is pretty good. Okay, so what we have now is we have particles that build up our logo, and actually now they are just popping out or popping on, and I do not like this. I want them to really build up a little bit slower. So I will go to my particle settings again, and I will change the size over life. So let's go to size over life and open up this tab here, and you see we have some options here, and I just want to create such a smooth curve, and I will just draw a new end here. So I want them to be fully, the full size until the end, but I want them to have this slight you see they are now a little bit of building up, and this is more or less exactly what I want, but in my case this is a little bit too long. So I will just draw a new curve here, and I want this to make this a little bit steeper. So like maybe like that. Let's see. And smooth it out a bit. So I'm not sure whether this was the right effect. But I think, yes, that looks quite good. We can adjust this later on when we combine this with the build-up particles. So let's say for now that this is fine. And let's create our build-up particles. Therefore, we just duplicate our particles logo layer by Ctrl D. And now I will just call this particles logo build. And of course the settings are exactly the same now, but we have to change something here. So first of all, we do not want them to stay in place. We want these to drop down. So what I will do here is I will go into our physics tab and open this up, and I will just close these so that we have a little bit more overview here. And instead of the air physics model, I want to use the bounce physics model, because of course we want them to fall down and bounce on the floor. And actually, let's create a floor right now. So we can create a new solid and call it floor. Color doesn't matter, size doesn't matter in fact. And we make this a 3D layer. We drag it down here. We rotate it on our x-axis for -90 degrees. And then I just take it on the z-axis and move it down. Actually, I will just quickly reset my camera so that we have our standard view here. Okay, so where is my floor? The floor is down here. And now I just have to tell our logo build particles that this is our floor layer. So let's come in here and let's open up the bounce settings. And for the floor layer, we select floor. And of course, that didn't change much now, but within a moment or in a moment, you will see what this effect does. So now we want to add some gravity here. So in my case, I will enter a value of 175. I think that this is a good value. And now you see, okay, now the particles start falling. And when they hit the floor, so we will scrub here to around 6 seconds, they should actually start jumping around. What they do not do now, I don't know why. Let's see, the floor layer is selected. The floor is, I will just drag it up here a bit and let's see. Yeah, okay, they do jump around actually. It was just too far down. So let's drag it to about here. Okay. So now you see the particles fall down and then they are jumping on the floor, and yeah, they are staying in the place, and we do not want this. We want them to slide away. So instead of jumping, let's go back to our particles logo build and let's go back to our bounce settings. You see we have this collision event. Now we can set them to bounce, but we also can set them to slide. And if I set them to slide, they will just slide away. But of course, these particles have no velocity because in the emitter settings we set this to 0. But now I want to reset these values. So I just will type in 100 and also the random, let's say 20% velocity distribution was 0.5, and the velocity from motion, you can take 20 here too, but it doesn't matter really. So you see what we have now is a bunch of particles because of course the emitter per second is very high. So I will reduce this in this case because we definitely do not need so many here. So this is, oops, I wanted to reduce it to 25,000, not to 2,500. And just for a moment, let's turn off our particles logo. So just to increase the performance here a bit, and let's see what we have. You see our logo is now being, or is working as an emitter. The particles are emitted and they fall down to the floor and they slide away. And I will just create a quick RAM preview to take a look at the speed here. So how fast this is working now. And I think that the Gravity has the right value, so the particles fall down quite nicely, but I think that the sliding is a little bit too slow. They are kind of sticking to the floor, and I do not want this. I want them to spread out a little bit better. So let's go back to our physics settings and to our bounce. I'm on the wrong layer, sorry, I have to go to the particles logo build, of course. So physics settings and bounce layer. And unfortunately, under the slide event, I cannot change the slide value. So I will go back to the bounce here, and I will reduce the bounce to 0. So I do not want them to bounce, but I want them to slide away way faster. So let's set this to 125. And if you take a look now they are hitting the floor and they are sliding away. And this is what we want, because this will be our animation that we will reverse afterwards. So you see now they are building up. Okay, so let's see. How long should this part of our animation be? So actually, I think that it should be around 4 to 5 seconds. So I want to stop the emission at around 5 seconds. So I move to 5 seconds or to 424 and set a keyframe to our particles per second, move forward 1 frame and set it to 0 to stop the emission. So now what we have is the particles emit and then they stop and they fall down and then they move out. What else do I want to do here? I want to change the look of the particles a little bit. So let's go into our particle settings. And let's add a little bit of random in the size. So let's add 35% of randomizing here, maybe even 50. And now I think they are too big, 12 is too much. So let's set them to 8 so that they are a little bit smaller. Maybe reduce this back to 35. That looks quite good. And you see that now these particles also are very small in the beginning, and then while they fall down, they get bigger, and actually I like that. But what I want is that in the end, they fade out smoothly. So I do not want them to just disappear on this. I just want them to maybe get opaque here. So let's go to the opacity over life, and let's take this preset, and now let's just draw a new beginning here so that they are fully opaque, and then they just fade off before they die. And now you see this creates a little bit of a nice transition here. And this is exactly what we want. So particles come together, rise up, and form our logo. And maybe the whole part is even a little bit long, still a bit long. So let's go to our emission keyframes and just drag these keyframes to 324, so around 4 seconds. So the whole animation will be a little bit shorter. I think this is better, but I can change the timing later on. Okay, so far so good. So we have kind of a nice animation. And what I want to do now is to just invert this animation. So how can I do that? So let's take a look. Actually, our animation stops at about 10 seconds, around 10 seconds. So let's say 11 seconds, all the particles are gone. And this is the point where I will reverse my animation. So I just moved to 11 seconds here, exactly 11 seconds. And now I will select my particles logo build layer, and I will go again into the physics settings. And you see in the physics settings, we have this physics time factor value. And what this does, this works kind of, you can increase the time. So you can speed up things by a value, or you can slow down things by a value. You can create, for example, something like slow motion, But in my case, I will use this value to reverse the time, to use it as a time reverse function. So, probably that in After Effects, we have the possibility to time remap a composition. But this doesn't work with Trapcode Particular. So if you do this, this probably will create some errors, and that's why we have to use the physics time factor to reverse our animation. So what I did is I set a keyframe at around 11 seconds. So press U and we will see our keyframe here at the time factor. And I will just move it 1 frame in front here. And now I will set another keyframe with a value of -1. And now let's just drag our work area start point or in point to our keyframe here, and let's make a quick RAM preview. And you will see what's happening. Particles start from our floor, they are starting to get visible, they come together in the middle and they start rising and create the impression that they form our logo. And this is exactly what we are looking for. So let's take a look at the speed of this animation, and you see now, okay, the speed of this animation is really slow. They're coming together pretty slow, but they're rising quite fast. So I think I have to retime the whole animation a little bit. First of all, it's way too long, and I really want to speed up the things a little bit here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of taking a factor of -1, I can, for example, take a factor of -2, and this will double the speed of our animation. Negative, so it will reverse the speed of animation and double it. And let's take a look, maybe this is what we are searching for. So let's take a look at the RAM preview. They're coming together and they're rising. What I do not like on this is that they're rising very fast, but they are sliding very slowly. So I definitely have to change these values. So let's go into the slide values, and instead of 125, set it to 150, or probably even higher to 175. Now let's take a look. They are sliding and rising, maybe even 200. Let's see. I will just make a quick RAM preview so that the speed matches. I want the speed to be more or less the same on the ground and during the rising. So let's see whether this works. I think that I have to reduce the gravity actually, because they are rising pretty fast. So let's just reduce the gravity to about 150, and this should make them drop a little bit slower and rise a little bit slower. Let's take a look whether this works. And I think that this looks pretty good. So again, let's make a RAM preview. Particles come together, start to rise up. And maybe I reduce this even to 125. Let's see. Yeah, actually I like this. I think that we can work with this. So, okay, this part is more or less done. So what do we want to do now? Now we want to build up our 3D representation of our logo that we created before, and we want to just time this. So let's enable it. Let's make it visible. And you see now already we have this really huge blob of particles here. And of course, I want this to start building up at the same moment when our particles here start to reach our logo. So I will just search for the frame where my particles start to reach the logo. And let's say this will be around, in this case, around here. So we are around at 14 seconds and 9 frames. And exactly on this point in time, we want the logo to build up. So let's go to our particles logo layer and let's go to our emitter. And now I will set a keyframe and take down the value to 0. And now I move forward 1 frame and set it to, I don't know, let's start with 50,000. Maybe this is a value that works. And now let's see how this looks. I will just move forward frame by frame. And actually I want to turn off our logo layer because we do not need this. We want to see what's going on. So you see that our particles are rising, and you also see that our particles are forming the logo. And these two together are creating a quite nice impression, or a quite nice effect. So actually I kind of like it. What I want to do though is I will create a quick RAM preview to see how this works in real time. So particles come together, they start rising, and they are forming the logo. And that's not too bad, but what I do not really like is the way that our particles, or that our logo builds up. So I think we have to change the look of the particles here a bit. First of all, I want to change the size of the particles. So I go to my particles logo layer and I go to the particle settings, and I also want to change these to the same settings as my logo build. So let's say what we have here. Let's see. We have a size of 8 and a randomness of 35. And this is exactly what I want to take over here. So size of 8 and randomness of 35. Because otherwise they will not fit together nicely. And I think this now will sell the effect way better. And you see now, it really looks like they are building this logo. And that looks pretty cool. And what else could we do? Maybe the build up is not fast enough, so I will increase the emission a little bit. So let's press U on our keyboard to reveal the keyframes, and let's move to our particles per second, and let's set it from 50,000 to 75,000. So this was the value that I had before actually. Now it's building up a little bit faster, and let's see, maybe this is better. And of course I want to end the build up exactly when my particles stop to jump to the logo. So exactly at this point in time, which is about 16:08, I will set a keyframe here, move forward one frame, and we'll stop the emission of the particles here. Let's make a RAM preview again. So let's take a look. I think that this looks really cool and that we have a nice animation to work with here. Now I want to add a little bit of an organic feeling to this animation. And maybe I also could start the logo reveal a bit earlier. So if you take a look, the particles are more or less really... I just move this forward a few frames. Let's see. That doesn't look too bad. I think I will just leave it like that. Okay, so now what we are going to do, we are going to add a little bit more of an organic feeling to that. And this is pretty simple. Therefore, we just enter our logo composition. And now we will add an effect that's called turbulent displace. Turbulent displace, and you can find this effect inside the distort. Yeah, you cannot see it now because it's outside of the recording area, but distortion under distort, you can find this effect. And if we just set up some kind of a distortion, I want to, decrease the size a bit. So from 100 to maybe, or no, increase the size a bit, I should say, because I want these to be a little bit bigger. So to something like 165. And if I go back to my main comp now, you see that our particles take over this shape now, and this looks kind of really organic, and this is pretty cool. And now, of course, we want this to warp around a little bit and change a little bit over time, and therefore we have the evolution effect or the evolution value. And I want to set a simple keyframe or a simple expression to this evolution. So I will just hold down Alt and click my stopwatch to open up my expression window, and now I want to type in time times, let's say, 200, and let's just make a quick RAM preview and see how fast this is evolving. And I think that, yeah, it's maybe a little bit too fast, so let's set it to 150. I'm not sure, we have to take a look how it looks with the particles. And now I want to just take a look at which point in time my distortion should end. So here I definitely want to have a distortion, but right at the moment when my particle or when my logo is finished or the build-up is finished, I want this to stop. So I will set a keyframe at around 16 seconds. So I will go back to my logo comp and make sure that my cursor is still at 16 seconds. And I will set a keyframe for the amount value. And now let's move forward, and I think that within half a second or about 1 second, let's try 1 second, we will just reduce the amount to 0. And you see that now we have, What I want to do now is I just want to go to Keyframe Assistant, and I want to change this to Easy Ease In. I don't know whether you see it in the recording area, but this will create just a little bit of a smoother curve here. So let's take a quick look, and you see that this curve now is a little bit smoother. So I just want to smooth out the amount of the displacement here. So let's make a quick RAM preview again. And I think that this is pretty cool. You see that our particles start to rise, and now it's still a little bit in motion. And actually I want to increase the evolution. So I think 150 is too slow. So let's increase it to 250, because you nearly cannot see any motion here, because of course through the whole particle distraction, and so it's not working that well. So let's make a new preview. Let's see what this does. And I think it looks pretty good. And pretty organic. Okay. So one thing that bothers me a bit is if you take a look here, right at this point in time, we have our particles, and then you see all the small particles that are starting to build our logo. And I think we have to change this a bit. So first of all, I want to press U on my particles logo layer. And what I want to do now is I want to reduce the first amount here. So I will set it to about 25,000, only the first amount. The second one I will leave at 75,000. I want this to just start building up a little bit slower, and then yeah, more or less increasing the number of particles, so that in the end that we have still a dense mesh of particles. And what I also want to do is I want to change the size over life. I do not want them to be completely at 0. I want them to start around here. So let's just redraw this curve. Maybe I can just draw a little bit of a smooth curve here. And maybe let's see how this looks then, because now the particles should not be so small in the beginning. And maybe this looks a little bit better. Maybe this is even still too small. So let's make something like that. So such a little curve here. Smooth it out. And let's see how this looks. And I think that this will probably look a little bit more organic. So line this up again to the right spot, right about here. And now let's take a quick RAM preview. And I think now these just blend a little bit better. You see that it's a little bit more organic looking. And I think this is pretty cool. Okay, so far so good. What we are going to do now is we create a very quick reveal. So, and this is pretty simple. We take our logo layer and drag it on top of our particles and just make it visible. And you see that, yeah, it looks pretty, it has the same shape. So we can use this to create a reveal. And the reveal will be very easy. You cannot mask particle layers, unfortunately, because if I could, then we could make a little bit more organic reveal here, but because you cannot draw a mask on a particle layer, I just have to use a very simple effect, and this effect is the linear wipe. So we take the linear wipe effect and drag it on top of our logo layer. And now what we do is we just put in a value of 50 for now, so that you see our reveal is exactly in the middle at 50%. And I will give this a little bit of an angle, so maybe not too much, maybe 110, and a little bit of feathering, so let's say 50 pixels. And now I will copy this effect and copy it on my particles logo layer. And now you see we have the same here. And I only have to enter my wipe effect now, and instead of setting it to 110%, I just have to rotate this the other way around. And this will be around, let's see what we have here, I think about 60%. And now if we change the transition, so let's see, I will just go back to my linear wipe here, and I will for a moment just lock my linear wipe because I want to link the two values together. So just lock the linear wipe here, go back to the particles logo, and now just open up our linear wipe right here. And I will hold down Alt and press the stopwatch. And now I will just link this value to this value. Okay, so now we linked the values, but what I want to do, if you take a look what's happening now, if I change the value on my logo here, you see that this doesn't work because it moves in the opposite direction, and I definitely do not want this. I want this to move accordingly, and therefore I just have to take 100, minus the value of our logo slider. Then I turn this more or less exactly the other way around on my particles logo layer. So let's take a look. And now you see if I change this, it will create a nice reveal. So maybe on my logo layer, I will just reduce the value. I will unlink this for a moment or unlock it to about, I don't know, 25 maybe 50 is a little bit too much, and maybe do the same here. Let's take a look whether this still works. Now we have a little bit of an edge here, but you see we will really create a very quick animation, so it will not disturb us that much. So let's take a look at what is the right point in time when we will create this transition. So the logo will be formed, is formed about 16 seconds. So let's say around 17 seconds, I want to create my reveal. So I will set a keyframe and set this to 100. Sorry, not to 0. I'm on my logo layer, yeah. And now I press U to reveal this keyframe. And let's say we want this to last half a second. So we'll put in 12 frames here, and then we set it to 0. And we can also easy ease these keyframes. And now you see that we have a pretty fast reveal. And now let's just make a quick RAM preview. Let's see how this looks. Maybe the reveal is a little bit too fast. Yeah, it definitely is. So I definitely have to change the timing here. So instead of half a second, I probably will take 1.5 seconds. So just drag this out and make it a little bit more smooth here. So let's see. Now particles form, rise up in the air, and this looks pretty good. And what else do I want to do? I want to just delay this turbulent displays a bit. So I will go back to my logo comp, and I want this to overlap a bit. So I want the logo to be smoothed out during the reveal. So let's say I will just move my cursor to around 17 seconds and 40 frames. And now let's move here and let's take a look here. And let's just drag out our last keyframe here. And maybe I also want to increase the amount from 50 to 75 so that we have, or even 100, so that we have really a strong distortion. And this may create a little bit more of an organic feeling. So let's take a look whether this worked out. So again, particles come together and rise up in the air, and then they form the logo, which is pretty distorted now. And then slowly our logo will be, or will take over its normal shape. And I think that this looks way better because now we really have this organic feeling. Let's take a look. Particles come together and form the logo, and now the reveal. That's pretty good. So actually I like this. I will just start the reveal a bit earlier. So half a second earlier, I will just drag these two keyframes a little bit to the front. And now the reveal will start a bit earlier. And our keyframe, our logo will be revealed. So now if you want, you can of course add a lens flare to this. So if you have optical flares, you could create a new solid and call it flare to help to sell this effect a little bit better. Optical flares. Put it on our layer here, put it on transparent, and set this to add. And now, yeah, we could just animate the position of this flare together with our, let's see how we can do this. So right here, it should be around here. Let's add a keyframe for the XY position. And right here, it should be around here. Yoop. Like that. And now we have this flare. Now we could also just press U to reveal our keyframes, and maybe change the brightness to about, set a keyframe for 100 here, and set another keyframe here. And now maybe, I don't know, 5 seconds in front, set it to 0. And let's do the same here. And let's see what we have got. You see particles come together, rise up in the air, form our logo, and now our logo is being revealed with a very, very simple flare move. You can of course spend a little bit more time to make this a little bit more beautiful, but I think that you get the basic idea. And last but not least, we will create a nice camera move. So therefore we will just create a new null object, make this null object 3D, and parent the camera to it. And now let's take a look at what we have here. So our reveal is at about 15.5 seconds. So I want this to rotate for about 180 degrees, and I want it to be finished right around this point in time. So I will open up the rotation controls or the rotation keyframes by pressing R on my null object and set a keyframe for the Y rotation. And now I will move back in time, so to our beginning of the animation, which is right here, and I will set this to -180. And now let's take a look. You see that now we are traveling around, and now our logo is rising, and in the end it is being revealed. And I will set this now to easy ease, these keyframes. And I want to open up my graph editor and change this graph a bit, so to make it a little bit more interesting. And therefore I will just, select both of these keyframes. I will make a little bit more room here. So select both of these keyframes and right click and choose keyframe velocity. You cannot see it now because it's outside the recording area, but keyframe velocity is what you want to use. And now instead of the 33%, we want to set it to 50%. Okay. Or even more, I don't know. Let's take a look how this looks like. It looks quite good, but it's not there yet. I want these to really, let's see, not 50%, but 75 maybe. And the same for this keyframe. So here, keyframe velocity, we set it to 75. And now you see we get a little bit other dynamic. So it starts really slow and then it should turn faster while it's building up, and then it's slowing down again. So this is probably my movement that I will use, and then the logo is being revealed. Okay, so I think that this is it with this tutorial. I will not show you the dispersion of the logo, so I think that you are really able to do this on your own because the tutorial is already pretty long. So let's take a look what we have, our final result. Particles are coming together, rotating, and our logo is revealed. Of course, you see that you can play around with timing. It's not perfect, but well, you have a little bit more time to figure out the right timing and create a nice smooth rotation animation. I hope that you liked this tutorial, that you learned something. And again, I want to invite you to take a look at my website, which is www.graphicinmotion.com. My name is Roland Hartmann, and I really thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.